The winter wind howled through the narrow streets of Oakwood Heights, a once vibrant neighborhood in Chicago now fading into urban decay. Detective Elaine Mercer pulled her coat tighter as she ducked under the police tape stretched across the doorway of 1428 Easton Avenue. The January chill seemed to penetrate deeper here, beyond skin and bone, settling somewhere in her soul. 2 victims, both female, mid-30s, Officer Jenkins reported, his breath visible in the frigid air. Sarah Armstrong and Lisa Bartlett. Armstrong was stabbed 27 times, Bartlett 55. Me puts time of death between 10 p.m. and midnight last night. Mercer nodded, steeling herself before stepping into the cramped living room. No matter how many crime scenes she'd witnessed in her 15 years with Chicago PD, the initial impact never dulled. Any signs of forced entry? She asked, pulling on latex gloves. None, Jenkins replied. Door was locked when the first responder arrived. Armstrong's sister called it in when she couldn't reach her by phone. The small bungalow was modestly furnished but neat. Nothing appeared disturbed in the front room, no overturned furniture, no struggle. The stillness made the violence that had occurred here all the more jarring. There's something else, Jenkins said, hesitating. Armstrong's son, 18 months old. He was found unharmed in his crib. Slept through the whole thing, apparently. Mercer's stomach tightened. Where is he now? With social services until next of kin can be contacted. Mercer moved through the living room toward the kitchen, where the first victim had been found. Lisa Bartlett lay on her back, arms outstretched, surrounded by a dark halo of dried blood. The savagery of the attack was immediately evident, multiple stab wounds concentrated on her chest and abdomen. Her eyes were open, frozen in an expression of terror. She was a kindergarten teacher at Westside Elementary, Jenkins said. By all accounts, well liked. No known enemies. Mercer crouched beside the body, studying the wounds without touching them. This is personal, she said. The number of stab wounds suggests rage, not just murder. In the bedroom down the narrow hallway, Sarah Armstrong's body told a similar story. She lay face down beside her bed, as if she tried to crawl away from her attacker. The bed sheets were soaked with blood, spatters reaching the pale yellow walls. And then there was the crib in the corner, a jarring juxtaposition of innocence amid carnage. It was empty now, but Mercer could imagine the child there, somehow sleeping through his mother's murder just feet away. Who found them? She asked, her voice steady despite the heaviness in her chest. Armstrong's sister, Vanessa Murray, Jenkins replied, checking his notes. She had plans to meet them for breakfast. When no one answered the door, she used her spare key. Mercer winced. Some images could never be unseen. I want to talk to her as soon as possible, she said. And we need to canvass the neighborhood, see if anyone heard or saw anything unusual last night. Back in the living room, Mercer noticed a half-empty wine glass on the coffee table, alongside a paperback novel. Someone's quiet evening, shattered. Let's get the forensics team in here, she said. I want every inch processed. Whoever did this might have left something behind. As she stepped back outside, the winter sunlight offered no warmth. Across the street, neighbors had gathered, sharing whispers behind gloved hands. A news van had already arrived, a reporter preparing to broadcast with the crime scene as her backdrop. Detective Mercer. The voice came from behind the police line, Andrea Keller, crime reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Any comment on what happened here? Mercer ignored her, walking to her car. The media would have their story soon enough, but first, she needed facts, not speculation. Back at the precinct, the investigation began taking shape. A murder board was established in the conference room, photos of Armstrong and Bartlett in life juxtaposed against the clinical crime scene images. Timelines were sketched, known associates listed. Sarah Armstrong, 34, worked as a graphic designer, Detective Ray Ortega, Mercer's partner, reported. Divorced 3 years ago. Ex-husband lives in Seattle. Lisa Bartlett, 36, kindergarten teacher. Never married. They've been roommates for about 2 years, according to neighbors. What about relationships? Mercer asked. Either of them seeing anyone? We're still looking into that, Ortega said. Armstrong's sister mentioned a guy Sarah had been dating for a few months, but she didn't know much about him. Mercer studied the photos. These women were killed by someone they knew. No forced entry, no defensive wounds on Bartlett suggests she opened the door to her killer. Captain Wells entered the room, his face grim. The press is all over this one. Double homicide, baby found alive, they're calling it the Easton Avenue Massacre. I need results, Mercer. We're working on it, she replied, unfazed by the pressure. She'd learned long ago that rushing an investigation rarely led to justice. The next morning brought little clarity. Forensics had found no fingerprints beyond those belonging to the victims and a few friends who had visited recently. No weapon had been recovered. The neighborhood canvass had turned up one potential lead, an elderly woman across the street who reported seeing a dark sedan parked outside the house around 9 p.m., but she couldn't identify the make or model. Mercer sat across from Vanessa Murray in the sterile interview room. Armstrong's sister was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I can't believe she's gone, Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. And Toby, what will happen to him now? He'll be placed with family, Mercer assured her. Was there anyone who might have wanted to harm your sister or Lisa? Vanessa shook her head. Everyone loved them. Sarah was finally happy after her divorce. She and Lisa had built a good life together. You mentioned Sarah was seeing someone. Yes, for a few months now. She seemed excited about him, but private too. I only met him once, briefly. His name was Paul or Peter, something with a P. What did he look like? Average height, dark hair. Maybe in his 30s. I'm sorry, it was just a quick introduction when I was dropping off Toby after babysitting. And Lisa? Was she dating anyone? Not that I know of. She was devoted to her students. That school was her life. After the interview, Mercer headed to Westside Elementary. The principal, Marion Jeffries, had agreed to meet during her lunch break. Lisa was one of our best teachers, Jeffries said, sitting behind her cluttered desk. The children adored her. Parents requested her class. This has devastated our entire school community. Had she mentioned any problems recently? Anyone who might have made her uncomfortable? Jeffries considered this. Not specifically, no. Though. She hesitated. There was an incident last semester with a parent. Nothing serious, he was upset about his son's progress report. Lisa handled it professionally, but he did raise his voice. Security escorted him out. I'll need his name, Mercer said, a small surge of adrenaline rising. Their first potential lead. Of course. Marcus Kowalski. His son is no longer enrolled here. Later that afternoon, Mercer and Ortega tracked down Marcus Kowalski at an auto repair shop in the western suburbs. He was beneath a car when they arrived, only his legs visible. Mr. Kowalski? Ortega called. Chicago PD. We'd like to ask you a few questions. The man slid out from under the vehicle, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. What's this about? Lisa Bartlett, Mercer said, watching his face carefully. You had an altercation with her at Westside Elementary last year. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by wariness. That was nothing. A misunderstanding. She was murdered 2 nights ago. Shock seemed to register genuinely on his face. Murdered? Jesus. That's terrible, but what's it got to do with me? Where were you Monday night between 9 p.m. and midnight? Here, working late. We had 3 transmissions to finish by morning. He gestured toward another mechanic. Ask Rico. He was with me until about 11, then I stayed another hour to clean up. Rico confirmed the alibi, and security camera footage from the shop's parking lot showed Kowalski's truck present during the critical hours. Another dead end. 3 days into the investigation, Mercer was growing frustrated. They'd interviewed dozens of people, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and still lacked a viable suspect. The media coverage had intensified, with headlines questioning the police department's competence. "We're missing something," she told Ortega as they reviewed the case files late into the evening. These women weren't random victims. The attack was too personal, too brutal. "Maybe we should look deeper into their past," Ortega suggested. "College boyfriends, old conflicts, anything." A knock at the door interrupted them. Officer Jenkins entered, holding a file. "We got a hit on that partial print from the back doorknob," he said. Peter Kurembes, 35. Minor record, misdemeanor assault 5 years ago, dropped when the complainant refused to testify. Mercer sat up straighter. "Peter." Vanessa mentioned Sarah was dating someone whose name started with P. "Current address is an apartment in Lincoln Park," Jenkins continued. "Works as an investment advisor downtown." "Let's pay Mr. Kurembes a visit," Mercer said, already reaching for her coat. The Lincoln Park apartment building was upscale, all glass and steel, with a doorman who initially refused them entry until Ortega displayed his badge. Kurembes lived on the 12th floor, in a corner unit with views of the lake. He answered the door in sweatpants and a university t-shirt, surprise evident on his face. "Can I help you?" "Peter Kurembes?" Mercer asked, showing her badge. "I'm Detective Mercer, this is Detective Ortega. We'd like to ask you a few questions about Sarah Armstrong." His expression shifted subtly, a tightening around the eyes. "Sarah? What about her? May we come in?" He hesitated before stepping aside. The apartment was immaculate, minimally furnished with expensive pieces. A laptop sat open on the dining table beside a half-eaten sandwich. "When did you last see Sarah?" Mercer asked, remaining standing though Kurembes had gestured toward the sofa. "A week ago, maybe. We went to dinner downtown." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "What's this about? Has something happened?" "Sarah Armstrong was murdered Monday night, along with her roommate." Kurembes's face drained of color. He sank onto the sofa. "Murdered? That's impossible. We just talked on the phone Sunday. Where were you Monday between 9 p.m. and midnight?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Am I a suspect?" "Just establishing timelines," Ortega said smoothly. "I was here, working. I had a presentation due Tuesday morning." He gestured to the laptop. "I ordered delivery around 8. The doorman can confirm I didn't leave." "How long had you been seeing Sarah?" "About 3 months. We met at a charity event downtown." He looked genuinely shaken. "Her son, is he?" "He's safe," Mercer assured him. As they questioned him further, Kurembes's alibi seemed solid. The doorman confirmed no one had left the building through the lobby after 7 p.m., and delivery records showed food arriving at 8:12 p.m. Unless he'd somehow scaled 12 floors down the outside of the building, he couldn't have committed the murders. Back in the car, Ortega sighed. "Another dead end." "Maybe not entirely," Mercer said. "Something about him feels off. Let's dig deeper into his background." The next morning, a new development shifted the investigation's direction. The coroner's final report included an overlooked detail, a small puncture wound on Lisa Bartlett's right arm, distinct from the stab wounds. Toxicology results showed a powerful sedative in her system. She was drugged first, Mercer realized. That explains why there were no defensive wounds. She was incapacitated before the stabbing began. But why sedate someone you're about to stab repeatedly? Ortega wondered. "Control," Mercer said. Or maybe the stabbing wasn't the original plan. They returned to the crime scene, viewing it through this new lens. In the bathroom medicine cabinet, they found prescription bottles belonging to both women, nothing unusual, just allergy medication, birth control, ibuprofen. But in the kitchen, a half-empty bottle of wine caught Mercer's attention. "The wine glass in the living room," she said. "We assumed it was just someone having a drink while reading, but what if the sedative was in the wine?" Lab tests confirmed her theory. The wine contained traces of the same sedative found in Bartlett's system. Someone had planned this attack, had known enough about the women's routine to know they might share wine in the evening. A week into the investigation, another connection emerged. Peter Kurembes hadn't just met Sarah Armstrong at a charity event, he had been a student at Westside Elementary 20 years earlier, where Lisa Bartlett had done her student teaching. The coincidence seemed too significant to ignore. When confronted with this information during a second interview, Kurembes appeared confused. "I don't remember any student teacher named Bartlett," he insisted. "I was 10 years old. That was decades ago." His alibi remained intact, but Mercer's suspicions deepened. She obtained a warrant for his financial records, which revealed large cash withdrawals in the months leading up to the murders, money that couldn't be accounted for. Then came another breakthrough. A neighbor from 2 doors down came forward with security camera footage that had captured a glimpse of someone approaching the women's house around 8:45 p.m. on the night of the murders. The figure was distant, their face obscured by a hood, but the build was similar to Kurembes. "It's not definitive," Ortega cautioned. "We can't make a positive ID from this." "But it's something," Mercer insisted. "And combined with the financial irregularities and the connection to Westside Elementary." They brought Kurembes in for further questioning, but he maintained his innocence, growing increasingly agitated as the hours passed. "I loved Sarah," he insisted. "Why would I hurt her?" "Maybe it wasn't about Sarah," Mercer suggested. "Maybe she was collateral damage." "What about Lisa Bartlett? What did she do to you all those years ago?" Something flickered behind his eyes, recognition, or perhaps fear. But he said nothing, requesting a lawyer. Without sufficient evidence for an arrest, they had to let him go. The case stalled again, days turning into weeks. Mercer remained convinced of Kurembes' involvement but couldn't prove it. Then, while reviewing school records from Westside Elementary, she found a disciplinary note from 20 years earlier. A 5th-grade student, Peter Kurembes, had been caught in an inappropriate situation with a female student teacher. The teacher wasn't named, but the timing aligned with Bartlett's student teaching placement. Further digging uncovered a sealed juvenile record. Kurembes had been sent to a youth psychological facility for evaluation following the incident. The details were vague, but it suggested something serious enough to warrant intervention. 3 weeks after the murders, Kurembes disappeared. His apartment was found empty, his bank accounts drained. International travel records showed him boarding a flight to Rome 2 days earlier. "He ran," Ortega said. "That's as good as a confession." "But it doesn't prove anything," Mercer countered. "Not legally." The case remained officially open, but with their prime suspect gone, the investigation lost momentum. The media moved on to newer tragedies, the public's attention shifted, and the Easton Avenue massacre became another unsolved case in the department's files. Mercer couldn't let it go. In her off hours, she continued to gather information, building a circumstantial case against Kurembes. She discovered he had changed his name legally at 18, his birth name was Perry Kurembes. Under that name, she found more troubling history, allegations of stalking from former girlfriends, complaints that never resulted in charges. 6 months passed. Sarah Armstrong's son, Toby, was now in the custody of his Aunt Vanessa. Lisa Bartlett's classroom at Westside Elementary had been taken over by a new teacher. Life had moved on for everyone except Mercer. Then came an unexpected breakthrough. Italian authorities contacted Chicago PD about an American expat arrested for assaulting a woman in Rome, Peter Kurembes. During his arrest, he had allegedly made statements about other women who had deserved what they got. Extradition proceedings began, moving slowly through diplomatic channels. Mercer prepared to fly to Rome to interview Coimbes, hoping for a confession that would finally close the case. The night before her departure, she sat in her apartment reviewing the case files one last time. Something still didn't add up: the brutality of the attack, the sedative, the fact that Toby had been left unharmed. If Coimbes had harbored a decades-long grudge against Bartlett, why kill Armstrong too? And if he had planned the murders carefully enough to drug the wine, why lose control and stab the victims dozens of times? As she spread the crime scene photos across her coffee table, a detail caught her eye: a small framed photo visible in the background of one image. It showed 3 women at a beach: Sarah, Lisa, and a third woman Mercer didn't recognize. She pulled out her magnifying glass, studying the unfamiliar face. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar. She searched through the case files until she found the witness statements. There, the neighbor who had provided the security footage. The physical description matched the woman in the photo. According to her statement, she had been home alone the night of the murders, had heard nothing unusual. Mercer sat back, her mind racing. What if Coimbes hadn't acted alone? What if he had an accomplice, someone who could enter the house without raising suspicion, someone who knew the victim's routines, someone who had been overlooked in the investigation? A friend. A neighbor. Someone who had given them an alibi by providing convenient but limited security footage. The next morning, instead of boarding her flight to Rome, Mercer drove to the quiet street in Oakwood Heights where it had all begun. The house at 1428 Easton Avenue remained empty, a silent memorial to the violence that had occurred there. 2 doors down, she knocked on the door of the neighbor who had provided the security footage. The woman who answered matched the photo: Rachel Winters, early 30s, friendly smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Detective Mercer," she said, recognition dawning. "Any news about the case?" "May I come in?" Mercer asked. "I have a few follow-up questions." Inside, the house was meticulously kept, family photos lining the walls. Rachel offered coffee, which Mercer declined. "We've located Peter Coimbes," Mercer said, watching Rachel's reaction carefully. "He's being held in Italy on unrelated charges." Rachel's expression remained neutral. "That's good news, I suppose. Does that mean he killed them?" "We believe he was involved," Mercer said. "But there are still unanswered questions. For instance, I recently noticed you in a photo with Sarah and Lisa. You were friends?" A slight hesitation. "Acquaintances, really. We met when they moved in. Neighborhood barbecues, that sort of thing. But close enough to go to the beach together." Rachel's smile faltered. "It was a community outing. The photo makes it look more intimate than it was." Mercer nodded, letting silence fill the room. She'd learned long ago that people often felt compelled to fill uncomfortable silences. "It was terrible what happened to them," Rachel continued. "Sarah had such a bright future ahead of her. And Lisa was so good with children." "Yes, she was," Mercer agreed. "You know, it's interesting. We found that Peter Coimbes was a student at Westside Elementary when Lisa was doing her student teaching there." "Did she ever mention that connection?" "No, never. Too quick." "What about your security camera?" "It seems conveniently positioned to capture someone approaching their house, but not clear enough to identify them definitively." Rachel's posture stiffened. "I installed it after a package was stolen from my porch last year. I was lucky to capture anything at all that night." "Very lucky," Mercer agreed. "May I see the full footage? Not just the clip you provided. I think the police already have everything relevant." Rachel stood up. "I'm sorry, but I have an appointment to get to." Mercer remained seated. "One more thing, we've been reviewing phone records. There were several calls between your number and a burner phone purchased with cash. The same burner phone that called Peter Coimbes multiple times in the weeks before the murders. It was a bluff, they had no such records. But Rachel's face told Mercer everything she needed to know. "I want a lawyer," Rachel said, her voice suddenly cold. "I'm not saying another word without a lawyer present." As Mercer left the house, she called for backup. They would need a warrant to search Rachel's home, to recover digital records, to find the connection that had eluded them for months. The investigation had taken an unexpected turn. Now, instead of flying to Rome, Mercer would be building a case against not one but two suspects, the man who had fled and the woman who had remained hidden in plain sight, watching the investigation unfold from just 2 doors away. What linked them? What had Lisa Bartlett done 20 years ago that warranted such calculated revenge? And how had Sarah Armstrong and her son become entangled in this decades-old web of resentment? As winter gave way to spring in Chicago, Detective Elaine Mercer prepared to unravel these final threads, knowing that sometimes the truth was more complicated, and more disturbing, than anyone could imagine. The Easton Avenue massacre had not been a random act of violence but a carefully orchestrated plan years in the making. And while one perpetrator had fled across the ocean, another had been watching all along from just down the street. Justice would come, but the answers might prove more troubling than the questions that had haunted the case from the beginning.